That's right. This is the Pregame Engineer Tailgate Mayor Racing Podcast, episode number 29 for Tuesday, December 22nd, 2015. I'm Tailgate Mayor Rusty Wallace and joined remotely this time by Pregame Engineer Andrew Sherwin. What's happening, my man?
Still be doing this 29 episodes in.
Not just 29 episodes, but here we are, 3 days to Christmas, and I mean, there's nothing more that I'm looking forward to than sitting down and doing a podcast.
That's right. We should be thinking about what we're buying for Mom, but we're actually getting together. What do we want to talk about as it relates to racing and NASCAR and doing this podcast?
Yeah, we'll keep procrastinating that off just a little while longer, I imagine. So, it is what it is. What you drinking today, man?
Tell you what, I got a homemade Kentucky Mule.
Man, you turned me on to them Kentucky Mules. You need to tell the folks out there what it's all about.
Yeah, so in this time, I went super frou-frou, and I bought, the super expensive ginger beer. It's not alcoholic, but it was, $8 for a 4-pack of 8-ounce pop-top bottles.
Yeah.
It's really good. I think I probably cheat a little bit on how you make it up, but basically it's bourbon. And you can use Rose's lime, or you can use fresh lime juice and something like honey. And I'll throw in a little bit of mint too to kind of get that mint julep thing going. And then you know the mixer is the ginger beer. So it's a pretty refreshing drink, really. It's kind of nice.
I'm a big fan. I've started ordering it at bars, and I've said, "Hey, can you make me a Moscow Mule?" And they say, "Yeah, I can do that." I said, "But before you start making it, just throw that vodka in the garbage and put me a rye in there." And they go, "Oh, okay, yeah, we can do that."
Yeah. Well, I that's what I need to try next is a rye. I've just been sticking to straight regular old bourbon, but I dig on a rye too.
I'm nothing if not consistent today, and I'm drinking the old Jim Beam Black and Coke. And on deck, we've got the Spaten Oktoberfest. It was actually the first Oktoberfest that I ever really got into, and became a big fan of it, and bought a 12-pack of it 2 months ago during Oktoberfest time frame, and found a few in the back of the fridge. Said, well, these need to get drank, so going ahead and taking care of that. Yeah,
well, I found an Oktoberfest left in my Taco Mac list, and it turned out to be pretty good. I can't remember whose it was, but on deck I've got the local. My favorite local IPA right now, the Jekyll Brewing Hop Dang Diggity.
Ooh. Yeah, that's a good one right there. And you got the wrong koozie for it, man. Where's the official
excuse me.
PETM koozie?
Hold on. I don't even have to go anywhere. I keep the PETM
beautiful
koozie at my desk.
That's fantastic. Oh, so it looks
there it
great.
Is.
Looks
Thanks,
great.
Steph.
So, this is our Christmas episode. We already talked about it. Christmas episode. I should have put lights on and a hat. I've got a ton of Christmas hats and Santa hats.
I really meant to do this downstairs where we did the podcast from last Friday.
Yeah.
But there's no Periscope this week because we're on remote. So the listeners out there just have to imagine there's wonderful lights in the background, and it's a very Christmassy atmosphere, etc. Smells like there's a turkey in the oven, all the good stuff.
Well, Christmas came a little bit early for the PETM podcast, and I know you had to work hard for it. We're up to how many followers now? 154, something like that?
I've got the podcast page, Twitter page open right now, and we are up to 154 followers.
That's fantastic.
Had a strong effort about the last week or so. I did a little research on social media, and I came up with a little strategy that appears to be paying off. Hopefully, we'll get some more people listening to this thing.
Yeah, hopefully so, and a little bit more of that PR and everything else going along with it. And if you're listening to this for the first time, hey, we appreciate you. We're going to do a special shout-out here, and when it's shout-out time, you know what time that means. There it is. So I know.
We love our screaming goat on the PETM podcast.
That's right. We're going to shout out to our 100th follower. When we hit 100, I mean, me and Sherwin were giving each other, I guess, text message high fives and stuff. That was really cool. Our 100th follower, her name is Bonnie. Bonnie is at least by her profile picture, seems to be a Jimmy Johnson fan. She's got the 48 in that I guess it's called a cover photo or something. It's the one behind it. It's actually a pretty good picture of the car. And you can follow Bonnie on Twitter at BELA Bonbon 99. That's BELA BONBON 99. Hey, we appreciate you listening and following to us. One other actually quick shout out I wanted to give before we got to our last shout out here. Quick shout out to our producer. We shout out to her all the time, but at the Frizz 11, her Georgia State Panthers. She's a Georgia State alum, and they played San Jose State in, I think it had some qualifiers on it, but it was the Auto Care. It was something against cancer. It's a good cause, and I'm messing it up right now.
Oh, the Cure Bowl.
Yeah, the Cure Bowl. Unfortunately,
that thing.
Unfortunately, Georgia State lost, but it was their first bowl game, and congrats to them for going to a bowl game. And our tails between our legs for the first time in however many years, 20 years or so, that Georgia Tech.
20.
Yeah, that Georgia Tech hasn't made a bowl game thanks to our good old 3-9 season. So, that stings a little bit, but at least I had somebody to root for there.
Yeah, that was great. I was definitely pulling for the Georgia State Panthers. That's a fun deal for them. They've only had a football program for about 4 years now, and they have made the leap from what was Division 1AA, or what we call the Football Championship Series, now to the Football Bowl Series, and then sure enough made a bowl in their second year at it. So that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, it is, and so props to them, props to their coach and everybody. Sherwin, you've got one more shout-out for us, and I'm actually excited to hear this one.
Yeah, so bear with me if it sounds like I'm reading, because I want to make sure I get this right. I wrote it out. So our next shout-out goes to Kenny Smith, who's a racer from the Midwest. I believe he lives in Iowa now, but originally from Missouri, and I think he spent some time on the West Coast. His Twitter handle is at USMC Kenny, Kenny, SGT. I take that to mean he was a sergeant in the United States Marine Corps, so we want to thank him for his service.
Appreciate your service.
But he's taken it a step further with his hobby racing by joining up with at Racing to the numeral Cure to put together a race that raises funds for soldiers that are facing battles with post-traumatic stress. And so that's a really cool cause. He's got a GoFundMe I'm going to share with the Twitter podcast handle. And it just sounds like a great guy. We interacted just briefly after we started following each other. I'd love to do anything I can to help him. He's also hunting sponsorship. So if whatever business you're in sounds like marketing at the grassroots stock car nation level it sounds like a good opportunity for you, then you should definitely go get in touch with Kenny Smith at USMC Kenny SGT.
Do you have that GoFundMe? Let's just say what it is. If it
yeah, but it's condensed for Twitter. Let me go ahead and click on it. And
actually, I think I've got it right here. It's GoFundMe.com/KB8H4O, letter O. Does that sound right? No, that's Kenny Adams. On behalf of my brother Kenny Smith.
No, it's GoFundMe.
I might have messed it up.
/NJAVSO.
NJ. Wait, what was it?
NJA.
VSO.
I need to brush up on my military lettering so that I could say that in case
that's really cool.
Audio gets broken up.
Yeah, so November, Joliet, Alpha, Victor, Sierra, Oscar.
Nice.
I memorized that a while back for some reason, and I think I got tired of trying to tell people, okay, it's C as in cat, and it's R as in
right.
R? I mean, it's R. Just do R.
Well, it looks like he's $270 into a goal of $750. I think that may be some sort of a sponsorship deal, but hopefully we can get Kenny all the attention that he needs to put this event on. It sounds like it's a great deal.
Well, appreciate your service, Kenny. I'm glad we can shout it out here on the podcast. That's if you go to that, that's really cool. That car up front looks like that's probably the one. It's sort of beat up and banged up, but you can tell
it looks like a Celica. That's what it looks like.
Painted orange.
As orange gets.
And is that a number 24?
Sure looks like it.
Nice.
Probably with a letter so that he can enter a field where multiple cars are using the same number.
Yeah. So good for you, Kenny. We appreciate that. So Sherwin's got one more thing for y'all today, and that's a nice holy bleep moment. And here goes, our sound effect for that.
Holy
Yeah. Properly recorded by Rusty. This is our holy. We're not allowed to cuss on this podcast because we just think that's the better way to go. But that lost in the shuffle of all the things that Dale Earnhardt Sr. did for the sport and as a race car driver is this neat little stat that to me it seems nearly unbelievable. So the qualifying races for the Daytona 500. Daytona 500 is a strange race in that for qualifying, in that when they line them up to qualify and do single car runs, the only two places that matter are first and second. All the other places in the field, for the most part, are set by how the duels go, which used to be, they used to call them the twin 125s. They're now the Gatorade 150 duels. And duel as in like an old school fencing duel, this is the way they spell it. And they're running those races at night now, which is awesome for people like us that work during the day. Mm-hmm. Just a little plug there. But Dale Earnhardt entered exactly 10 twin 125 qualifying races in the 1990s, and he won exactly 10.
Is that so?
So he entered. He batted 1,000 in Gatorade twin 125 qualifiers in the 1990s.
I remember in 99 or 2000 or so, they were talking about the team of the 90s in baseball. Was that going to be the Braves, who had so many pennants in the National League? Was it going to be the Yankees?
13 of them.
Was it going to be the Yankees, who had, how many did they have? 3 championships, but all toward the end?
3 World Series, I believe.
Yeah, so there was a lot on that. Well, who was the man of the 90s in NASCAR when it came to Gatorade duels? I don't think there's a whole lot of question in that. Well,
when
in
you
that question,
win every single one you show up to, I mean.
And
the guy owned Daytona. That's why it was so weird that it took him 20 years to win the big Sunday race in February, because he won everything else, kind of like Tony Stewart today, but even more impactful was Senior.
Well, sure, and it was. I would say it was less of a crapshoot then on who's going to win. Once it comes down to it, because all the factors now. But it does seem weird that it took him so long for the 500, but he proved he can race there. That's for sure. At least on those 100-mile races, or was those 100-lap races, whatever it was.
Let's see, a 125 and a 2.5-mile track. So what are those?
Oh, never mind.
Races?
Yeah. So those are even
Can I do
shorter.
any math? Yeah, I don't.
I don't.
75 lap or 70, whatever it is. I don't.
Yeah.
I do math for a living. I don't want to do it for a hobby.
I say the same thing about computers, and here I am juggling 4 and 5 different things and wires going all over the place. At least this is hardware, where I do software. So
it's 60 laps, by the
way. So Sherwin, last week we dropped some knowledge, didn't we?
You dropped the heck out of some knowledge, and I helped you with it a little bit, but it was a great subject about mechanical grip and wedge.
Yep, and wedge. And we're going to continue that series, and we might get to a point where we're stepping out of what in the world we know. You and I were both looking up stuff. You already said we don't have the Periscope running today, but just as we were entering the podcast and on the pre-show, Sherwin and I are sitting here arguing over what the track bar does.
Yeah, we were. We were trying to make sure we were on the same page.
Right. And I think we got aligned with each other. So we're going to talk about the track bar. Last week we talked about wedge, and we talked about how adjusting the spring tension on the rear of the car can tighten you up, loosen you up, or help you out in general. And I think, being that if you're listening to the crew chief, I think as a NASCAR fan, probably the first thing you do is you're going to a race and you're watching. After a few races, you need something else to satiate you a little more. And that's, to me, it's listening to the crew chief. Listen to what the guys are saying behind the wall and what sort of adjustments they're making and everything. And two things you hear every time. You're going to hear track bar, you're going to hear wedge. So we've tackled wedge, and let's talk about track bar. So
yeah, and one of the things that we also need to talk about, we're going to dive deep into this track bar conversation, but we also need to talk about how in the Camping World Truck Series and the NASCAR Xfinity Series, adjusting the track bar is different than what we have now in the Cup Series.
Well, I might have to let you do that because that was an unprompted, unscripted. You're going off script, man.
Hey, that's what I do.
That's a good man.
Gotta let the mind wander.
Yeah, so he's Sherwin will drop some knowledge here. I think the first thing we need to do, Sherwin, is tell everybody or come to an agreement between you and me on what the track bar even is, you know? And I think it's important to say that it is, well, I think it's prudent to say it's a very important piece of the car, and it's on every car we all drive. And like you said in the pre-show, it's called the sway bar.
Yeah. Basically what the track bar is a rear sway bar, but the difference is there's a point of rotation. The track bar can rotate about the left side of the car via an up or down adjustment to the right side of the car.
Right, and so backing up just a little bit, what is this whole track bar, sway bar thing? So think about a car with no axles, with no wheels on it, no axle on it, right? Well, you have to somehow get that car attached to the axle. The way you do that is with what we talked about last week, with those springs and shocks, so that the chassis can absorb the bumps in the road and everything, so you have those springs and everything.
Shocks will be part of the Dropping Knowledge series.
For sure. So the problem with that is if you just take the chassis, which is all of the car except for the axles, if you take the chassis and put it on the axles with springs and try to drive it around, guess what's going to happen? That thing's going to sway left and right and all over the place, right?
Yeah, well, we've seen cut tires when the track bar mount gets broken because of that exact reason.
Yeah. So the chassis is going to be sliding all over the place because it's just bouncing around on those springs. What you need is something that's going to tie that axle to the chassis itself. And so that's what in a production car, and the cars that you and I all drive every day, it's called the sway bar. And you can go up under your car and look at it. Just go up underneath the back of your car. If that might be only rear-wheel drive,
Actually, to be honest with you, the last time I saw a rear sway bar that wasn't underneath a four-wheel drive vehicle was a front-wheel drive car, believe it or not.
Huh. So
I don't think my Mustang, for instance, has, because it's a solid rear axle, okay. I don't think it has a sway bar.
Gotcha. I know my truck has one.
Yep.
Because I've seen it. So go up underneath your truck or your friend's truck or something. What you're going to see is a bar that is tied to the left rear axle. So you'll see it going from the left rear axle, and it's a stiff bar that goes up to the right rear chassis. So that's hooking the left rear down at the bottom at the axle, and just below the axle, really, there's sort of a drop bracket there. And it goes to the up and to the right to the right rear chassis.
Yeah, and that's to keep the body from laying over on top of the tires.
Exactly. So that keeps it from swaying left and right, hence called a sway bar. But they call it a track bar in NASCAR. And that track bar in NASCAR is adjustable, where in your car, in your production car, there's not a hole in your windshield where you can stick a wrench down in it and move it up and down.
For sure. And, the assumption in a passenger car is you're going to do just as much going to the left as you are going to be going to the right. So to have one corner pivot and the other not just doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Exactly. So here's a point where you're probably going to have to kind of close your eyes and imagine this with us. And if you're driving down the road, then pull over to the side of the road while you're listening to the podcast and close your eyes first. But
for sure don't close them while you're driving.
Or close them at the stoplight and wait till somebody honks, something like that. But imagine that bar that's connected bottom left to the axle, top right to the chassis. Let's imagine that you can take that and mount on the top right to the chassis, and you can move it up and you can move it down, right? So you can move it, straight up in a vertical direction if you move it up, and imagine that the track bar length itself doesn't change. So what does that do to the car, Sherwin?
Yeah, well, so if you think about it, here's the perspective that you want to think about. If you're sitting in traffic, for sure, this should be easy. You're looking directly at that car in front of you. Put your traditional crosshairs right on that car. Okay, so you got a vertical axis and a horizontal axis. Imagine that if you put the track bar down, that vertical axis starts to tilt to your left. Okay, and then if you put the track bar up, that vertical axis starts to tilt to the right. That's sort of what we're dealing with.
Yeah.
And just know that in the beginning, because we normally go left, the geometry of the car is set up to where that vertical axis actually doesn't start at vertical. It's already slanted to the left. So it's a matter of, do we push it farther to the left, or do we push it closer back to straight up and down?
Yeah, and so I know it's tough to follow, but if you move that track bar up, and of course your axle is still going to stay in the same place, it's going to stay on the ground. You move that track bar up, that pulls the car down to the ground, right?
Yes.
If you move that track bar down, it pushes the car up off the ground.
Right.
It pushes the chassis, I should say. The chassis comes up off the ground.
And the body's hung directly to the chassis, so
right.
They move together.
And at the same time, since that bar's not changing length, if you move it up, it's also going to, depending on your perspective, it brings the tires to the right, or rather, it brings the chassis to the left. So it brings them together.
The bar isn't flexible.
Right.
The length between the two attachments doesn't change. But if you change the angle, then you actually change, quote unquote, the width of the car.
Yep, exactly.
And that is the width between the left tire and the right side of the chassis and the body.
Yeah. And so I think one of the things you have to think about too, what helps me is thinking about it in extreme. Like, all right, well, let's say you move it a foot up. What is it? What happens?
Well, I remember we were playing that NASCAR game, and you went like 7 rounds down on the track bar, and the thing wouldn't even. You were like having to steer all the way to the right to go left.
yeah. That's one of the things I tell people. You don't think you have to steer right in NASCAR ever? Well, here, let me give you 7 rounds on the track bar and see if you need to turn right. So. And that's a good point. That's a great place to play with some of this stuff. Me and you need to go back and hit one of them NASCAR games.
I need to buy one that's actually 2-player. I'm still frustrated with it. I mean, I know I spent like $9 at GameStop for a used game, but as single player, I played it for about 10 minutes and gave up on it.
So that's what our track bar is doing mechanically. So it is bringing the car up and down. So track bar up means it's pulling the car down to the ground and also pulling the car left in relation to the axle, or rather pulling the axle right in relation to the car or into the chassis. Now, if you move track bar down, then that's going to push the car up off the ground, and it's also going to push it away, or push the axle and the chassis away from each other.
Yeah, it'll push the end result, the simplest result, is it pushes the axle back up underneath the car.
Mm-hmm. So Sherwin's that's mechanically what's going on here. Sherwin's going to tell us on the track what that means.
Yeah, so one of the reasons why it's so hard to find information about the track bar is because it's not an exact science, and it changes every year that they change how the arrow operates on the car. I think.
And real quick, I know we talked about that in the pre-show. I don't know if we said it on here just prior to starting to drop knowledge. If you look for wedge adjustments on the internet, you're going to find them all over the place, and it's great, and it's perfect explanations and everything. If you're trying to find track bar adjustments, I believe what we've just said so far eclipses everything on the internet about track bar.
Well, and I think that's because wedge adjustments exist at every level of stock car racing. Whether it's could be a Bandolero, could be a Legend car that doesn't even have a spoiler, all the way up to the Sprint Cup Series. That mechanical relationship between the chassis and the suspension and the track, that it basically stays the same. It's a science. It's not. But with the track bar, you bring aero into play, and like it changes things quite a bit. It changes mechanical grip for sure, because if you think about if you're pushing up or down on the right rear, you're also making changes to the left front and the right front, and the relationship of weight there. But predominantly, what I want to speak about is the aero relationship. Like just the simple components of, okay, if we stick the ass into the car further up into the air, well, guess what? The spoiler's higher, and we've now changed the rear downforce on the car. So if you hear a driver talk about coming out of the corner and he's loose, but the crew chief's looking at all the pictures they take, and he says, I don't see anything with the front end that looks crazy. The splitter's not down, or it's not too far up, or, it's like, okay, so maybe we just need a little bit more aero grip. So you run the track bar down and stick the right rear corner further up in there and catch a little bit more wind. Maybe that's what you need, and then with the car of tomorrow, the Gen 5 car, and especially the Gen 4 car before the car tomorrow, that was a really common adjustment. I'm loose. All right, track bar down. Boom, out we go. And those are different cars than we have today, but you saw that adjustment a lot. And on the other side of the coin, I'm tight. Okay, so we lower the track bar and bring the right rear end out of the air to allow the rear end to slide. Like we had so much rear grip, we were either actually pulling the fronts off the ground, or there was air getting up underneath the car, which basically is the same thing.
So the adjustment is just like the wedge adjustment. So there's a hole in the back of the car. You stick a wrench down in there, and you go track bar up by unscrewing, track bar down by screwing in. But starting this past year, there was a new wrinkle into that.
Yeah, well, we still do that in the Camping World Truck Series and the NASCAR Xfinity Series. But in the Cup Series, and I think this has a lot to do with that whole aero seal the car to the track, this is the way we're doing things now. They wanted the driver to have a chance to adjust track bar on the run. So these guys have had a mechanical worm motor on the track bar, and most of them have it on the steering wheel. It's a little roller device, like a toggle switch where they push up and it rolls, and they have to sort of maintain a reference point, whether they have a readout in the car that says you're plus X number of inches or minus X number of inches from where you started. And for the most part, based on what we've been able to hear over the radio, at least with the driver that we follow the most, is that he plays around with the track bar during the run, but when it comes time to pit, he tries to get it back to zero, because at that point, the crew chief can make a hard change to the track bar that can move the bell curve a little bit, or can say, yeah, I think we'll just leave you where you're at, you adjust the track bar as you need, but we're going to make a wedge adjustment, or we're going to make a tire pressure adjustment.
So, yeah, and some more topics for future dropping knowledge. Tire pressure for sure. And what was the one you mentioned before? We'll run it back and listen to it. But some more. The good news is we've got recorded footage of exactly what it is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, tires is a thing. Shocks are a thing. Aero is a thing. Track bar is a thing. And wedge is a thing.
Right. Right.
And all those things work in unison. So we're going to try to cover them all one piece at a time, and then maybe right before the Daytona 500, we'll try to have a compilation show where we mix and match and understand why you might adjust multiple of those things at one time.
Absolutely. So I think that's all there is to say about Trek Bar. If y'all got questions on it or something, or think we're stupid or wrong or whatever, drop us a line on Twitter or something, or email. We'll tell you what the G chat is here at some point later in the episode.
Well, I want to interject really quick because we sounded kind of dumb when we were talking about the old twin 125s and the new Gatorade Dual 150s. So it used to be 50 laps, 2.5 times 50 is 125.
Mm-hmm.
It's now 60 laps, 2.5 times 60 is 150. So that's why I was confused between that. So I mean, not that we have to cover our tracks.
It's all good. And I'm the one who has the less historical knowledge in this group here. So I'm just going, well, I know that they race Gatorade duels in late January, early February, and I'm going to watch them. And however many laps they says it is, that's what it is this year.
Yeah, and basically another cool thing is we're only 2 months away from the Daytona 500.
That's that is the best part. People talk about they want the season to be
to the day, I think.
Ooh, 22nd, huh?
Yeah, I believe.
Well, that's cool. So people talk about how they wish the season were shorter, and I hear you. I just really like that the off season is very short. I'm sure the drivers would appreciate another month off, quote unquote off. Of course, they're doing all their things that drivers do, especially nowadays. But I'm sure they would want more. But I really like that. I'm only depressed for like 6 weeks, right?
Well, I love it from I need more content perspective.
Yeah, but
I don't love that we have to go up against college football and the NFL.
That's true.
So if there was some way to meet in the middle where you have some of what the NFL is doing now, which is they don't just play on Sundays and Mondays now. It's Thursdays. It's fixing to be Saturdays. We had a Saturday game this week. If we could mix in a Wednesday and a Sunday race, or a Saturday and a Thursday, or a Tuesday or something like that, I think, and get some more races in the summer and give these guys more time in the fall when they don't have to compete with the most popular sport, at least in America. I know that we could have a tough argument with Champions League and the other European leagues, British Premier League, about what is the most popular series on earth. But certainly trying to go against NFL on Sundays in the fall is tough to get eyeballs.
Yeah. So, that said, I don't know how much more knowledge I can drop before I just run out of ideas. So for that, I'm thankful that we only.
Well,
have
that's
some
true.
minutes.
We don't need too much of an all season because there's way too many topics to try to come up with, and we've dubbed this thing a racing podcast, and specifically geared toward NASCAR. And I think we thought that we may not have a whole lot of content to bring you today, but I will say that the IndyCar series, I don't know that their schedule officially dropped today, but their schedule's out there. They're going to run 5 oval tracks. They are going to revisit Pocono. Some question about that, given the Justin Wilson situation.
Mm-hmm.
Rest in peace, and prayers for your family and all that stuff. We don't want to belittle that for any reason, but they're going to get it kicked off in Petersburg as usual in March. We had tentatively talked about going to the Honda Grand Prix at Barber Motorsports Park just north of Birmingham, which is April 24th. However, thanks to our interaction with an ARCA driver, we may have to consider going to the Nashville Fairgrounds on April 9th.
I've already planted the seeds in in doing that, and we'll let the listeners know more if once we know more, if we know more. But there's some pretty exciting stuff, and we may have our next live event at an ARCA race.
Well, I hope that we're able to. Obviously, don't want to bill it too high, but not only would I expect us to do the podcast live from Nashville Fairgrounds if we decide we're able to go, but I would expect we might actually have a racer guest for that show.
Yeah.
And there's an invitation out there for some things that are really exciting for us. So hopefully we can put that together and get that buttoned up the right way and get on down to Nashville, do some boot stomping and ARCA racing.
That's right. Well, man, what's your Christmas plans here? Start winding this thing down after we've dropped our knowledge. See what Sherwin's up to for Christmas, and
yeah. Well, the little sister, the only sibling, is flying in from Denver on Christmas Day with the boyfriend.
All righty.
Who I've not met yet, so that'll be
sounds like you need to go ahead and kick his ass.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Just for good measure. I mean,
we may have to have the talk, the big brother talk. Apparently, he likes IPAs, so I've been a very friendly, very friendly big brother, and I put together a care package of local IPAs. That's one of the reasons why I had this Jekyll today. So I bought so much beer today, it's ridiculous. They didn't have all the right singles that I wanted, so I bought like a 6-pack of Monday Night, a 6-pack of Jekyll, a 6-pack of Sweetwater, the Hop Hash, and a Sweetwater or a 6-pack of the Abita Wrought Iron IPA. I'm going to put together a little care package of Southern IPAs for the boyfriend I haven't met yet. So I'll pick them up on Friday, I guess, and then I'll be at the parents' house for a day. Then I'll come back here, just because. There's no reason to stick around too long.
What is it that they say? A drunk mind speaks a sober heart. So
something like that.
So get him liquored up a little bit, and then ask him what he really thinks, and then of course still kick his ass. But
well, he seems like a scrawny guy, so I think I'm in good shape. Unless he starts running, then I'll just have to let him go.
Sounds good. Well,
what about you, man?
Yeah, my parents are in town, and probably going to go hit up the grandma's house, hit up the old in-laws' house and everything. So
where are they in town from?
They're in town from Maui, Hawaii. Hawaii. When we going
to convert their money to American money?
Oh, they just did, matter of fact, and they got in. So Dad got a job transfer deal that got him out in Vegas, and then got him another job transfer deal, got him out to Maui. So cheap place to go for vacation, that's for sure, and stay with the old rents. But yeah, they traveled the 5,000 something miles to come back to here, and we're all from here, and Grandma and everything lives out in Snellville, so we're gonna go out there and have fun. Snellville, everywhere, everybody's somebody in Snellville, man.
Tell you what.
The old town motto. So I got to tell you, and I've already told you, but I'll tell the podcast that I come home the other day. My parents are borrowing my truck because I let them borrow it when they're here, and they went off and they kind of sent me this weird text message because they said, "Hey, are you still at home?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm still at home." They said, "All right, we need to drop back by the house." I said, "Okay, well that's weird." I didn't care. Like, whatever, come on back. But they came back, and my dad said, "Hey, there's something wrong with your truck. You need to come out here and look at it." And I said, "Well, what have you done to my truck?" And I walk outside, and in the back of my truck, he had put a brand new big green egg, and that was my Christmas present for this year. He said, and he said, I'd have given it to you on Christmas, but there's no way that me and your mama and your grandma was going to be able to get this thing off this truck, so we just figured we'd drive back here. So, man, I'm just beside myself tickled on that thing, and we're fixing to have some serious cook-offs here, cookouts and stuff. And I think what you had already said, something we've been toying with, is having the old PETM show up at some local barbecue competition, and if we don't win it, we'll at least have drank all their beer.
Well, that's one of the things that we do when we show up to places uninvited. But I think it's been something we've been waiting on doing for too long. we have a friend that's into it, and we're into cooking for sure. If you follow the Twitter handle, every now and again I'll put some stuff on there that I've cooked at home or that Rusty's cooked, or we've cooked together, either smoked or whatever we did on the grill or even in the kitchen. So I'm super jealous of the green egg. I will be forced to keep up with the Joneses at some point. I've read too many good things about the green egg to not eventually have one. And I think going to barbecue competitions could be every bit as fun as camping at the racetrack, minus, I mean, the race would be the food, as opposed to we just kind of, we pay attention to the food when we go to the racetrack, but the racing is the thing we're focused on. For sure.
So, yeah, I'm looking forward to it. We'll be at something. We'll have to figure it out. Man, let's close this thing out with the college football playoffs. They begin New Year's Eve, I believe. So next Thursday, let's get some of your predictions in. So we've got 2 games: Clemson, Oklahoma, and Alabama, Michigan State. Who you got? Clemson, Oklahoma.
Well, I can't offer any predictions because I am rooting for one team in each game. My dad's a Clemson Tiger alum, so I'll be rooting very hard for the Clemson Tigers. And having lived in agricultural-rich western Michigan with lots of Michigan State fans, I'm going to be rooting for Sparty against Alabama.
I think it's still good picks, though. Well, anything's a good pick here. I got to tell you, so I've been rooting for Clemson the whole time. I mean, Clemson's ACC, obviously good to see ACC at the top for fans like us. I had a bet at work with a guy, and he said, I think Clemson is going to go into the playoffs undefeated. In other words, they will, and this was about 6 weeks, I would say 6 weeks ago. And he said Clemson's going to go into the playoffs undefeated, and that means they'll have to win the ACC championship. They'll have to win their last several games, and they'll have to win their rivalry game and all that stuff. And I said, man, Clemson does one thing every year, and that is Clemson. If there's one thing they do, they've turned their own name into a verb, and that's they Clemson every year. Well, they're now at the Orange Bowl, ranked number 1. I still actually owe him $10, but I always pay up on that, and I will pay. Actually, I had $20 and he didn't have change, so we just punted till later. But I tell you, if they didn't already, Clemson, I don't. Obviously, it's a different caliber teams that they're facing at this point and everything, but it feels more real now than it ever has for them. So. Yeah, I got to go with Clemson and Alabama, Michigan State. I think like you, not necessarily like you in terms of rooting for somebody, but I'd just really like to see somebody different up there. I mean, imagine Clemson, Michigan State versus Oklahoma, Alabama. Oklahoma, Alabama just sounds like the way football has been for a long time.
We've seen it before. Oklahoma beat Alabama in the Sugar Bowl just a couple of years ago.
Yeah. So, Clemson, Michigan State, and then I'm just going to do what you do, and I'll just pick Clemson. Why not? They're number 1. Why shouldn't they?
Yeah, well, I mean, there is one more compelling storyline if I don't get to pick what I want. Clemson, Alabama is a very compelling storyline because Dabo Swinney played corner at the University of Alabama.
Yeah. So that would be kind of a cool
and it would be an
clash.
All Southeast SEC versus ACC championship game, which would be, well, I guess not that new. We just had Florida State beat Auburn 2 years ago.
Well, man, let's start closing it down then.
I'm trying to dig some other soccer thing into this, but I don't have anything. Really.
That's all right. We're at 45 minutes. I think the people can go home and have themselves.
Last week, so.
Yeah, have themselves a good Christmas.
Basketball, hot headed. As far as I can tell, the drivers already gotten in them and at least shaking them down at some racetrack or another. Did we talk about Blaney getting a full-time ride with the Wood Brothers? They're going to race every race next year in that 21 car. That's pretty cool.
That is pretty cool. I can't remember if we talked about it, but yeah, I think that's good for him and good for the young guys in the sport. I may have been premature here, but I already started our music.
Hey, that's fine. I can't hear it. The foils of working remotely means that I can't hear the fun sound effects. So we're going deep into it. Rusty probably wants to close with all the particulars on social media, so I'll let him start that.
Well, yeah, so you can follow us on @PETM Podcast. You can follow me @Tailgate Mayor. That's spelled Tailgate Mayor. Sherwin, we got a G-Chat, don't we? We got the Gmail.
We do got the G-Chat.
Hit us up.
All lowercase, PETM Podcast @gmail.com. You can follow me, Andrew Sherwin, @PREGAMEENG, pregame ENG. And yeah,
That's it, boys. Y'all have a good Christmas, and we'll talk to you.
Happy holidays, New Year, and all that stuff. We don't know if we'll get back to you next week, but thumbs up to happy holidays. Thanks for listening.